It's very delicious to act with beautiful men.
Would you care to say which you thought the most beautiful?
At 93 years old, Angie Dickinson, Hollywood's original femme fatale, just said something no one ever expected to hear. For decades, she danced through the spotlight with grace and mystery, sidestepping questions that followed her everywhere. But now, with just a few quiet words, she confirmed what tabloids only dared to whisper and what insiders always suspected. It wasn't a publicity stunt. It wasn't part of a tell-all memoir. It was something far more powerful, honest. Dickinson didn't speak from a stage or a press conference. There was no dramatic lead-up or fanfare. Just one sentence that reignited a story Hollywood had tried to bury under layers of glitter and gossip. The sentence? He was the love of my life. The he in question? None other than President John F. Kennedy. Suddenly, decades of speculation felt different. Not just rumor, but something real. Something raw. This wasn't a tabloid fantasy or a publicist's trick. It was a woman near the end of her life, finally choosing to open a door she kept locked for more than 60 years. But Angie's story isn't just about one legendary love. It's about the journey from a small town in North Dakota to the heights of Hollywood. It's about fame, loss, power, and a private pain few knew about. And it's about the cost of beauty, success, and secrets in an industry that rarely lets you have all three. And what she endured behind the scenes. That's the part no one tells. Before the cameras, before the headlines, Angie Dickinson was just Angeline Brown from Colne, North Dakota. A town so small it barely registered on a map, far removed from red carpets or flashing lights. Her early life was quiet, surrounded by traditional values and post-war expectations. Nothing suggested she'd one day become one of Hollywood's most magnetic stars. In the 1950s, she took a job as a secretary, standard for women at the time and safe. Show business wasn't even on her radar. But everything shifted when she entered a beauty pageant on a whim. That moment, small and almost accidental, changed everything. She won, and suddenly, casting agents took notice. That win didn't launch her into stardom overnight. It started small, bit roles on early TV anthologies, mostly in westerns. No glamour, no big checks. But Dickinson had something most others didn't. She was watchable. Even in the background, you noticed her. Her presence wasn't loud, it was felt. By 1954, she made her television debut, and 2 years later, she landed a more visible part in Gun the Man Down opposite James Arness. It wasn't a blockbuster, but it was a clear signal she could hold her own. In a genre filled with rugged male leads, Angie brought a calm intensity and quiet strength that stood out. Her rise wasn't sudden, it was built brick by brick. She didn't chase fame. She earned it. And with each small part, she was proving something bigger, that she didn't just belong in Hollywood, she had the power to shape it. But if people thought that was impressive, they hadn't seen anything yet. Angie Dickinson's rise wasn't flashy, it was steady. But when the 1960s hit, she went from rising star to undeniable icon. And it started with one unforgettable film, Rio Bravo. Starring alongside John Wayne and Dean Martin, Angie didn't just hold her own. She stole scenes. In a genre that typically sidelined women, she was front and center. Her role wasn't decorative. It was defining. She played Feathers, a sharp, self-assured woman who could match wits with any man on screen and off. That performance changed how Hollywood saw her. She wasn't just the beautiful newcomer anymore. She was a serious contender. Doors swung open, and in 1960, she walked into Ocean's 11. Surrounded by Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, and the rest of the Rat Pack, Angie did more than keep up. She elevated the room. Amid the swagger and smoke, she brought a different kind of energy. Cool, poised, irresistible. She made glamour look effortless. But it wasn't just charm. Dickinson had range. By 1964, she flipped the script again in The Killers, a dark, stylish thriller based on an Ernest Hemingway story. This time, she wasn't the love interest or comic relief. She was Sheila Farr, a femme fatale tangled in lies, power plays, and murder. It was a gritty, layered role that demanded more than beauty. It needed nuance. And she delivered. In just a few short years, Angie proved she could do it all: westerns, crime capers, psychological thrillers. She didn't fit the mold of the era's typical starlet. She broke it. While other actresses were boxed in by their looks, Angie used hers as a tool, not a limitation. And yet, even as she climbed, the industry was watching her through one lens: beauty. What came next would test whether Hollywood could handle a woman who was both stunning and serious. By the 1970s, Angie Dickinson had already carved out a career most actresses only dreamed of. But it was her role as Sergeant Pepper Anderson in Policewoman that made her a household name and a lightning rod for controversy. Airing from 1974 to 1978, Policewoman broke ground. Angie became the first female lead in a primetime cop drama, stepping into a space that had been dominated by tough, grizzled men. But this wasn't a gimmick. Her character wasn't just a token female officer. She was smart, skilled, and in charge. And viewers couldn't get enough. The ratings soared. The show was a hit. And suddenly, Dickinson wasn't just a star. She was a symbol of female empowerment in an era desperate for more of it. But not everyone was convinced. Feminist critics saw something else beneath the surface. While Angie was clearly playing a strong lead, the show never let viewers forget she was also glamorous. Her looks were often front and center: tight outfits, stylized hair, soft lighting. Was this progress? Or was it the same old Hollywood trick, dressed up in a badge and uniform? Dickinson herself was caught in the middle. She defended the show, insisting that women could be powerful and beautiful, that it didn't have to be either/or. But the debate raged on. And then came Dressed to Kill in 1980, a stylish, seductive thriller that reignited the criticism. Dickinson played a woman caught in a violent web of lust and murder. The infamous elevator scene became iconic, but also controversial. Was it art or exploitation? Through it all, Angie kept doing what she'd always done: pushing forward. She didn't beg for acceptance or ask to be seen a certain way. She just kept choosing roles that walked the line between power and vulnerability. And behind the scenes, she was facing something far more personal than any critic's opinion. Behind Angie Dickinson's dazzling career was a personal story marked by heartbreak, one that Hollywood rarely showed, and the media too often twisted. In 1966, she gave birth to her only child, Leah Nikki Bacharach. Born prematurely, Nikki was later diagnosed with autism, a condition that in the 1960s came with very little understanding or support. Angie didn't publicize the struggle. She quietly stepped back from her rising career to focus on being a mother. She gave interviews less often, took fewer roles, and kept Nikki's condition private. But even as she tried to protect her daughter from the spotlight, the press wasn't kind. Rumors swirled, stories surfaced, and instead of sympathy, Angie faced speculation. Was she a good mother? Was she sacrificing too much or not enough? Then, in 2007, tragedy struck. Nikki died by suicide at the age of 40. The loss was unimaginable. And for Angie, the grief was compounded by how the media handled it: cold headlines, sensational stories, zero sensitivity. Reporters dissected the tragedy like a plotline, not a real-life heartbreak. Dickinson, who had spent decades guarding her privacy, suddenly found her deepest pain turned into public spectacle. In later interviews, Angie opened up just a little. She spoke of Nikki's brilliance and struggle, of the pressure of raising a child who needed constant care in a world that didn't understand. She didn't ask for pity, only understanding. And she made it clear: her daughter was the center of her world. That chapter of Angie's life wasn't about premieres or awards. It was about sacrifice, silence, and surviving grief in a world that didn't always allow its stars to be human. But through all of it, the career highs, the private losses, one mystery still lingered. One name that never stopped following her. And finally, after decades of silence, she said it out loud. For decades, the rumor hovered like a shadow, whispers that Angie Dickinson and President John F. Kennedy had shared more than just mutual admiration. The tabloids speculated. biographers hinted. But Angie? She said nothing. Until now. In a quiet moment, away from cameras and flashing lights, Dickinson finally spoke the words that confirmed what many had long suspected. He was the love of my life. No build-up, no scandal. Just a raw truth from a woman who had kept that part of her soul hidden for over 60 years. It wasn't a fairy tale romance, and it certainly wasn't public. Angie never paraded it for headlines, never used it to define her legacy. Their connection, whatever its boundaries were, lived in the quiet corners of her memory, untouched by Hollywood and unclaimed by history. And that, perhaps, is why it meant so much. The love she described wasn't about power or status. It wasn't about two icons basking in each other's fame. It was about connection, something rare, honest, and impossible to recreate. Dickinson didn't reveal details. She didn't have to. Just that one sentence peeled back decades of silence and gave the world a glimpse of a truth it had only guessed at. Looking back, it makes sense. The mystery, the allure, the subtle deflections every time the topic came up. She was protecting something, someone, that mattered too much to reduce to gossip. And in choosing to share it now, she wasn't chasing attention. She was closing a chapter. On her terms. It's a fitting end to a story defined by beauty, power, tragedy, and strength. Because at the center of it all, beneath the fame, the roles, the criticism, was a woman who lived with grace, loved in secret, and never stopped commanding the world's attention. Angie Dickinson's story is one of beauty, talent, love, and loss, lived quietly behind the spotlight. If you found this glimpse into her life as fascinating as we did, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss a story like this one.